any music that I've put out in the past, that's at the core of it, is like, one, how can you live life to this? And then two, if you're an outsider, or if you don't feel like you have somewhere to belong in your day to day, this music is going to give you the fuel to like keep moving forward and know, okay, there is a place that I do belong. If I have that dream, or if I'm hungry, or if I'm trying to live for God in a world that, doesn't want me to.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio, and Ayiesha Woods, Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and musician. Together, they talk with artists and industry insiders to discover our connection between music and faith. You can connect with us on Facebook or X at Between Grooves, and on Instagram at Between Grooves Pod. Now, here's James and Ayiesha.
Guess what, Ayiesha?
Tell me.
Episode 300.
Oh, man. This deserves, we need to have a party or something.
Can you pump in some applause?
This is a pretty big deal.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Episode 300 of Between the Grooves. And this is a very special episode because we have a very special guest. This is a conversation you want to listen to the whole thing, because this will change your life. This will inspire you, especially if you're an artist, if you're in the music business or whatever. You need to listen to this conversation. Our guest this week, Zauntee on Between the Grooves.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Zauntee, when we found out you were coming on the podcast, Ayiesha kind of freaked out.
Oh, we're in a good way.
Can I tell you why?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
So I've got 4 little boys, right? And all throughout my house on a regular basis is, God told me. And it's constant. My boys love you. Okay, so if my boys love you, you are officially a part of our family. So we love you too.
Oh, I love you all. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
Now, Zauntee, that's not your target audience, is it?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like one of the kind of main reasons why I started making music is being the artist that I would have needed. I felt like if I saw somebody represent God for my generation, if I had seen that even, at an early age. I don't know the age range of how old are your sons?
My oldest is actually 12 years old. So we've got a preteen. And my youngest he's a little guy. He's 3.
I love all ages for sure. I mean, especially just knowing like when I was, 12 years old, I was writing my first songs when I was about like 10 anyways. And I think like age 12 to 13, I started to kind of like get into that lane, or like, how do I make beats? How do I start producing? By 14, I was like working on Logic and things like that. So shoot, I mean, I think that, if I can be the voice, it's like, hey, it's cool to follow God. It's cool to reach, people with that message and stand on it. And if they can get that now, I hope that I can be a part of that journey. That's my goal in the long run, whether they're, 28, 18 or 8, just being somebody along the way where they feel like inspired to represent God.
What about the older generation? Like, what's the feedback from I don't want to say naysayers, but the people that don't like your style of music?
I think I've had that, me and my dad talk about that when we look at how God has blessed us through the social media side of things. There's always going to be people who disagree with what you're doing. I think a lot of that is, art can comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And I think sometimes there are people who are really used to a certain way of doing things, and they're used to what they're comfortable with. And I don't hold it against them because in the same breath, I've had people of all ages like really be blessed by the music and impacted by it.
Sure.
I think more than age, it just tends to be if somebody's comfortable in their ways and they feel like, man, this genre, this sound, there's no way that can be of God, or there's no way that can actually be positive. And the way I describe it to them, like my grandparents were missionaries for like 20 years. And when they asked me about some of the specifics, I was always just like, look, you guys, when you were missionaries, there's an element where you have to, decide who are you trying to reach, and then what are the best ways to reach that person. And for me, reaching my generation, I'm trying to be a light in a place where I don't see as many lights. It's less common for somebody to be in this space and move in these, industry events and studio sessions and concerts and like be bold about Christ, but be able to stand toe to toe with mainstream rappers if you put me next to them on a playlist. So I think that's how I describe it to the people who don't understand. And I never hold it against them if they, don't love it or don't agree, to each their own. I know that I can't let opinions determine my decision. So I can't compromise the sound, the look, or the way that I do this because somebody doesn't get it. I have to reach the audience that God has called me to reach and just keep showing up until that person has been reached.
That's pretty powerful.
Awesome.
Those are pretty powerful words. And the way I can relate that a little bit in my life is I'm a radio guy, and I trained for radio. I worked in radio for many years, but every radio station that you work at, there's a different audience, right?
Sure.
So the first radio station I ever worked at was a country music radio station. I personally, I don't like country music. I'll be honest, but there's good country music out there, and you have to know your audience. And if that's who your audience is, and that's what they listen to, and there's demographics that radio stations look at as far as age groups. If you're male or female, your interests, what social media platforms you're on, all that stuff. Radio stations look at, and you try to tailor your show for that one person that is within that demographic. And so you essentially have done the same thing with your music. Obviously you're younger and you can relate, you're relatable to your audience, which is also important. But recognizing that out of the gate versus a lot of people who get into the music world and want to become a singer, songwriter, whatever, but they don't really know who their audience is.
They don't know their audience.
Yeah, they're trying to do everything,
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I think even like looking at that, like one of the things that helped me is really just who am I trying to serve that maybe isn't being served? Who doesn't have like somebody targeting them directly? And I feel like, growing up in church, growing around ministry, like the hardest person to invite to church, the hardest person to try and like plug in and bring them to a moment where it's like, hey, Jesus is the answer. To me, at least, my journey is always like the, teen to early 20s young guy, and I remember having specific instances. I grew up playing basketball all the time, and there would be moments where, once I was like committed to representing Jesus in every area, I would have moments where I'd be like, man, I wish like I could give somebody some music right now, but there's an education gap in Christian music, which I grew up on Christian music. I love it, but there's an education gap where like there was nothing that I could text somebody that felt like it was exactly in the same lane or level.
Sure.
In mainstream rap, I'm listening to these other songs. I'm like, man, like, yeah, there's a lot of good Christian music. There's a lot of good music that represents God, but there's nothing that, I wouldn't have to basically say, okay, now don't really listen to how it sounds. Just listen to what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of that for me, finding that target audience, and what I would encourage, like, artists and people on the way up is like, who do you want to serve? And then you have a responsibility to be excellent at serving that community. And then you'll automatically reach people outside of that demographic that you never even expected. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm really serving multiple people with this. I think it's Rick Rubin who said, if you make art for yourself, if you make music for you, like kind of what you would have needed or what you need in the moment, chances are there's going to be other human beings who resonate with that. And that's kind of what I've seen as well. It's like, at 16, 17, what artist, if I saw that video or heard that song, would have made me feel proud to like represent Jesus in the environments that I was in. And then like, if I'm making music for that kid, chances are there's a lot of those out there. And like you're saying about the country station, or you're saying about a demographic, if you show up consistently and you show like, hey, I'm here to stay and I care about you, I'm here to give you something that resonates with you, you build relationship with that audience, and then they're supportive.
Yeah, in my case, I didn't have to sing. I didn't have to sing or play an instrument. I just spun the tune, so I was lucky.
I hear you. Zauntee, who are you listening to in this season? Like what gets you going, gets you fired up? What do you enjoy?
That's a great question. I have a lot of music that I enjoy. I feel like I'm listening so much to my own music and the creation process. I'm not usually listening to myself, for sure. I think I kind of have a few different buckets when I'm listening to music. Sometimes I'm listening to references. So I'm like, listening to like, okay, what's in the rap game right now that's like working? What's resonating with people? What are the common denominators? Why is it resonating? How can I compete? Yes. How can I from this? So that's kind of like more like work mode. Like I'm driving somewhere and I know I have a session tonight. What are some songs that I need to be aware of to compete with, I guess? Because I always tell the team, like, excellence is worship, and I need to be able to finish a song and it could go on a playlist next to any artist, and there's not a dip in quality, not a dip in communicating the message. So that's one bucket. I think the other bucket is like, when I'm trying to get in God's presence and just make that a priority, I'm either listening to some form of worship, or I love like the era of Christian music that was, when I was growing up. So I'll listen to like stuff from the 2010s, and honestly, where your boys, their era now of them being, like 12 years old, what they're listening to, it'd be like me going back and listening to the Christian music I was listening to in that era. And then the nostalgia of it, and also just going to concerts and stuff when I was growing up. Going with my family to like Winter Jam out in Tampa, Florida, and stuff like that inspired me. And then my other bucket, which is probably my favorite, and I probably annoy anybody who's in the car with, because it's mostly what's on. I listen to a lot of classic rock. I'm always listening to stuff like 70s, 80s, 90s.
The best eras. The best eras.
That's right.
I'm listening to everybody from, who was I listening to? Like anybody from like Creed in the 90s, or like Bon Jovi and U2 in the 80s, or like 70s, like it could be anybody from Jimi Hendrix or Creedence Clearwater Revival, or just whatever.
Okay.
That's daylight music. You're driving with the windows down and it's bright outside. That's what you're to.
I think a lot of people can enjoy that music. My son is 22 years old now, and his streaming playlist is all over the place. The new stuff, but a whole bunch of that classic music from the 70s, 80s, 90s that I enjoyed.
Just made sense.
And it just made sense. like it was the best, like in my mind, it was the best era. And he's listening to that stuff, and a song will come on and he's cranking it and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great I remember that song. And like, I can't believe that's on his playlist.
Well, my theory on that too is like good music lasts, and I think
that's right.
I think Gen Z and everybody younger than that, and there's this element that I've noticed, especially just watching what kind of people have become fans of what we do. It's the movement generation. They long to belong to something. They want to identify with something. They want to be part of something. I think a lot of like I was literally in the gym yesterday and ran into like a neighbor, and he was talking about how his son, we were talking about gym playlists, and he was talking about how his son, same kind of age range, is listening to like classic music. And he was like, man, it's just cool that my son's listening to what I was listening to.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is artists were saying something, and a longing for that, because right now the music industry's washed out. It's oversaturated with this like, hyper negative, there's just so much. It's become normal, but there's so much garbage. And as an artist, I can't come from a perspective, like I'm not going to tell, somebody that's one of my peers, like, man, all the music that's out there, it's all trash and you need to listen to good music. Like that's not going to get across. And what if I go into like, I'll sometimes like, I've done sets where I'm in a public school, or where I'm at an outreach and nobody knows who I am, but just like kind of how I bring it up is just like, look, everything that you listen to, you become what you consume, you know, and what you're spending time on. And I'm just trying to give you, you know, music that's going to put you in that place where hard work, God first is the motto. Like if you are, I say I make music for underdogs who know they can be champions. So if you want to have that Kobe Bryant mindset where you see it when nobody else sees it, you got to pick your fuel. And so I'm giving you that mindset fuel. I think that's why people in my generation do gravitate towards older music sometimes, because they long for a message. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, some of that.
It's awesome that you're able to give it.
Yeah, and recognize it.
Yeah.
Right. I think sometimes the not all the time, and this isn't a rule or anything like that, but I think some of the older music has more depth to it. Whether it be musically or lyrically, and that's not to say the music, you know, current music that you hear out there doesn't. Sometimes the message is simpler, but sometimes, you know, people are looking for that meaning.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, one of my favorite artists of all, I'd say my favorite band of all time, and one of my biggest inspirations, you know, on stage. I used to watch hours of his performances, but like Bono and U2. One of the reasons why I'm so inspired, like I tell people, like, if you want to try and kind of figure out my stage presence and kind of my MO, a couple artists is like early Kanye West mixed with Bono. It's like looking at that hunger for movement, like, and obviously Zauntee it's a completely, you know, an artist that's never existed before, and I'm going to change the game forever. But the way that I've been inspired to do that is seeing movement-oriented artists, like the quality of the music and the quality of the message, you know, songs like Walk On or Streets Have No Name, or, you know, like there's an element there where it was just so inspiring and refreshing to watch concert footage of this guy up there, and he's singing about that human need for God, whether people realize it or not. And everybody is a part of movement. And that's one of the reasons why I love, you know, rock and roll so much. One of the reasons why I love any artist who's been able to curate a movement is because that is at the core of what I want to do. Is I want it to be a revolution. I want it to be a movement of people who feel like I got nowhere else to belong, so this is it. This is home.
I love that.
Yeah, I think any music that I've put out in the past, that's at the core of it, is like, you know, one, how can you live life to this? And then two, if you're an outsider, or if you don't feel like you have somewhere to belong in your day to day, this music is going to give you the fuel to like keep moving forward and know, okay, there is a place that I do belong. If I have that dream, or if I'm hungry, or if I'm trying to live for God in a world that, you know, doesn't want me to.
When it comes to Christian music, is there a specific artist or group that inspires you at this moment?
Yeah, I think I look at it like a timeline. Like Toby Mac was the first artist that really inspired me when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And around that age window, I was going to, you know, concerts and just festivals and things like that with my parents, and just it blew my mind. I was like, this guy is crazy. Like that really inspired me. And then Skillet and Switchfoot were those three artists in the Christian space. And there's a lot of other songs and artists here and there, but I feel like, you know, those were the artists where I consumed their albums at a high level. And all respect to any artist who does music for God. I really feel like, you know, I just know how difficult that is. So I respect anybody who does it. I think for me personally, after those three artists, right, I found a gap. I was like, man, the next phase of my life, the next phase of what I'm called to do, I don't feel like there's anybody serving me right now. Like, not
that
anybody
space.
giving me exactly. And so it was kind of like a take responsibility moment where it's like, all right, cool. Well, then I'll make it. Like, that's where sometimes, you know, there are people who walk through horrible trauma. There are people who walk through pain. There are people who walk through difficulty. And sometimes I'll just tell people, look, I'm sorry you went through what you went through. It's not fair. I know it hurt. But the reality is sometimes God allows us to walk through things to be the inspiration for somebody else, to be the special forces where God knew with his help, you could make it through that. But without you, somebody else won't make it. Right. And in the music space, in life, with your testimony, God calls us sometimes where it's like, hey, there's nobody here yet. You got to stand up and stand out. You've got to be different in order to make a difference, because somebody's going to need. Every time I hold a microphone, I say, you have stories only you can tell, gifts only you can give, and your survival is proof to someone else that they can make it. I want people to understand how much they matter, that they're giving something that's never been given before. I think being inspired by Christian artists growing up and then realizing, okay, there needs to be somebody else, you know, reaching people like myself, reaching somebody who needs this sound and this look and this type of music. I took the responsibility, and God has blessed me because of it, because there are a lot of people who need it. So my job is just to move out of the way, let him work, and keep showing up, keep serving, you know?
That's it.
So you started writing music around 10 years old, and creating and producing and whatnot. How old are you now?
I'm 24.
24? Can I, Ayiesha?
Just wonderful.
I cannot believe the maturity I'm hearing.
Right.
Honestly,
it's all God, and then shout out to my mama, of course.
I'm just saying, like you know, we've talked with younger artists in the past, and you can hear the
immaturity, not
necessarily immaturity, but maybe naive and just not knowing the business, perhaps, or sometimes I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but giving a canned
immaturity.
Well, the canned response. You know, you ask a question or you have a conversation, and it's almost like they're reading off, you know, what the label told them to say because it sounds good and it's a good reaction to whatever the question might be. And this is a conversation. This isn't you're not reading off your notes or anything like that. And I would suspect it's very similar when you're on stage. Is it not?
100%. Yeah. First of all, thank you. I mean, when I'm at the end of my life and I look back at this, I just want to inspire somebody, one person. You know, Jesus moved for the one. I'm trying to follow his example. I want somebody to feel like they have something to bring to the table, to feel like, you know, there were moments growing up where I felt left out or I felt like my voice didn't matter. And I want people to know their voice matters. I want them to feel that. So I try to get it across, like, God doesn't use the people who are perfect, who have it all figured out. He uses the people who are willing. He'll equip you with gifts. And so for me, right, like, I'm not perfect. I don't have this all figured out. I mess up every day. But I feel like I try to keep that heart of King David, where even in the moments where I'm at the darkest point or I mess up the most, keep that place of like, all right, God, I'm far from perfect, but I need you. I want to be used by you. Please just allow me to be part of your plan in some way. And he does it. He gives you the words to say.
He absolutely does.
People like you guys, right? Like in 2017, I was making songs in my bedroom as a 17-year-old. Nobody knew who I was. Now I'm on a remote radio interview, podcast conversation. Somebody's in, Canada, somebody's in Florida, and we're talking about music out there that's mind blowing to me. Like, I'm just the gratitude that I can take from this moment. Like, there are people who actually want to ask me questions about this art and ask me about why I'm doing. I can't believe it. Like, I'm so grateful. It's the kind of thing where, I'm super honored that God allowed me to start doing this at a young age, because I've gone, putting out my first song in 2017. I've been in it for 7 years now. I have 7 years of experience before age 25, and I've walked through some hell. I've walked, as everybody has, right? But I've walked through some, I'm on, I've been in multiple record deals. I've been with multiple team members, multiple friend groups. Like, God has allowed me to walk through so much to get to this point. But I just truly believe it's because and so he's like, okay, cool. You're the one. I'm calling you, and I'm going to use you in a way nobody's been used before. And I say that I'll never forget this. And I'm getting personal with you guys, because I just feel that, even like you said, bro, that relationship, like we're having a conversation. I'll never forget. Yeah. I was in a meeting, and a previous manager that I had just like looked me dead in the face. And I had been saying in songs and like in an Instagram caption or something that I was chosen, because I truly believe that I was called for such a time as this. And he looked me dead in the face. And this is somebody who I worked with, Inner Circle, at the time, early on in my career. And he was just like, you're not chosen, and you need to stop saying that you're chosen, because it makes other people feel like they're not. And at the time, I was not mature enough to understand that was coming from a place of insecurity. And it broke me in that moment, where I was like, man, like, I don't know. I just took it to heart. Like, I was naive, and I was new to the business. I was like, this is the manager. He knows what he's talking about, And I remember feeling this sadness, like, man, am I proud? Am I arrogant? Am I making people feel badly because of this confidence. And
Maybe he felt bad. Maybe he felt bad.
That's what it was.
You know?
Yeah.
He was telling on his own insecurities.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's something my mom used to tell me when I was, growing up. I had moments where I would be like bullied or left out because I was different. Because I love Jesus. I talked about it. I was trying to do the right thing. And, sometimes other kids don't like that, obviously. And it took me time to learn the nuances of being around peers and representing God in a way that reaches them. But I just remember like my heart was just, I want to inspire. And that broke me up so much. Like, man, why is that? Fast forward, right? God allows me to go through so many things to get me to this point. Now I understand that in first person, me saying I'm called, I'm chosen, I'm the one, I'm anointed for this. I'm saying it to give people the confidence that if I can be used by God, so can they. They are just as chosen, just as called, because I'm imperfect, I'm broken, I've gone through it. But if God can use me, how much more so can he use you? And it's like, that's why. That's why we do what we do. That's why the three of us are having a conversation that in 10 years from now, somebody we will never know about is going to play back and going to be like, wow, this is for me. I need it today. And it's because you and we showed up. The three of us were faithful to put in the work, to be faithful with our platforms and our gifts, and let people know, like, look at God using us. We don't have it figured out, but it's all him. And then boom, somebody's going to inspire and do the same at whatever platform they've been given.
Ripple effect. It's awesome.
Exactly.
And you know what? I think a lot of it stems from, number one, you being in true relationship with Jesus. And number two, your surrender. You just saying, yes, God, do whatever you want to do with my life and my gifts and my abilities. And he took that yes and listen, you've just scratched the surface. You've just scratched the surface. You're not even 25 yet. Listen,
just getting started.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You are one of 7 kids in the family. Are you your mom's favorite?
No, far from it. One of the things that she was very intentional about growing up, my mom is a drill sergeant. I love her so much. Not literally, but like in our home.
That's awesome. I love it.
She did not let me get away with anything. And I'm so thankful for it. The man I am today is because my parents poured into me, and no matter what season we were in, just making sure that I was becoming the best version of myself. So I'm the oldest of 7. I have a lot of responsibility where I just feel like I got to set an example. I got to show my siblings. Wow. I want them to skip any season where they're not walking with God. I want them to like be locked in and believe it. And so I try to empower them as much as possible. But mom has always done a great job of like our whole family. I mean, we're all best friends. Like she's very intentional about making sure everybody knows their value. Our parents really see like what our gifts are, and like kind of try and help facilitate that. So the music thing, I mean, they believed in me from the jump. I wrote my first song on a napkin when I was 10, and they were like, okay, cool, there's a gift here. And they would just do everything they could to help me grind in that area. And it's been the same with all of my siblings. I mean, my, the oldest girl, my little sister I'm so proud of her. She is gifted with cosmetology and with hair and makeup, and she just graduated and got a license in all of it. It's a completely different area than music, but she's being faithful in her gift. So I think
that's it.
There's no favorites. I think each of us have become kind of specialists in our own area, really. Just like there's a focus that kind of caught fire when the music thing started working. I think me and all my siblings kind of had this awareness like, oh shoot, like if we pick what we're passionate about and we kind of lock in and we work as a family, work as a team, we can be successful and make a difference. So we're super aligned on that. Family's everything for me, man. It's God, and then it's family, and then it's my music, my ministry. And that's pretty much all I think about all the time.
That's awesome.
You mentioned that you wrote your first song on a napkin. Do you still have that napkin?
I actually might. I have this bin that's like got a lot of like papers and song notes in it, and it might be in there. I don't know.
Might be worth.
I know I have like.
Might be worth something someday, eh?
I agree. That would be amazing to find. I'm not gonna lie though. I do have the notebook. So the first song I ever put out was called God Taught Me, and I have the notebook where I wrote it in. And in that notebook are like a lot of my first songs. So I tend to probably keep too much. Like I have every access bracelet from every show I've done. I have all of the lanyard. They're literally sitting behind me in my studio right now. I just got a pile of lanyards hanging up.
That's fun.
So hopefully, I like your idea. Hopefully I have some piece of paper here and there or a lanyard or something like that that's worth something. Maybe we even, make a little museum showcase or something. Who knows?
Well, or it's just going to be a throwback, thing for social media at some point, right?
Exactly. Well, and I'll tell you this too. Like, I mean, one of the things that really the gratitude that I feel on a regular basis, one of the things that helps me stay in that place. I've just been around artists who they had a dream at some point, they made it there, and then they change as a person, and you're around them or you're, at some show and I don't know, just in an environment where it's like, man, like that person doesn't seem like you would want to hang out with them. And I think a lot of that is just as human beings, sometimes when we win, we tend to lose perspective on what it took to get there. So that's part of why I like to save everything and keep everything. And I'm always remembering the journey, because I remember, opening for 10 artists and there's 15 people in the room, and I'm just as nervous and just as excited and walking off stage with like, wow, I just performed, like the gratitude to even be on a microphone. So I try to remember all those moments so that when I'm in moment, like I did my first headline tour last year, and I cried pretty much every night, if I'm being honest, like getting off stage was like, wow. These are people who came to like sing the songs that I wrote, the stuff that I lived.
Yeah.
If you have gratitude, I think I've studied people who are successful and actually enjoy it and appreciate it and are happy versus like the people who get everything they want and they're depressed. And a lot of times the common denominator is, do they have family and close friends around them? Is there somebody they're sharing the journey with? And then also, are they grateful? Do they have perspective? Or do they feel like entitled, and then they feel pressure because they got to do more, or they're, God's gift in a way where they're arrogant, instead of God's gift in a way where they're like chosen and picked to do something special on earth. So I try to like, okay, I believe this is going to be massive. I believe we're going to fill arenas someday. So I got to have that perspective now, so that when we're at the highest level, I can actually enjoy it, instead of just being a mess.
It must be pretty mind-blowing when the audience participates and sings along.
Oh, that is the craziest feeling. I never get used to that feeling. Like, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's like, Miss Ayiesha, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about with this, but like, there's just a moment where you're like, whoa, like
how is this real?
Yeah, exactly. Like this, I remember where I was sitting when I wrote this, and now there's, X amount of people listening to this. I did a listening party for the album release when I was I went to Orlando, Florida. I'm from Tampa. I grew up in Tampa. I live in Nashville now. But a lot of times I go back to Tampa to shoot videos and stuff because there's so much part of my story there. But I went to Orlando because I used to drive to like this open mic thing in a restaurant, and I would perform there, and that's the 15 people in the audience, and I'm the opener, and I'm looking in the mirror before like, okay, gain your composure. And so I was like, man, I want to landmark this. I want to have a checkpoint where I go and do a listening party for this album release We Already Won that just came out. And even that, there were songs that were unreleased that I had been just posting about, like, I want me to drop this, and they knew those words.
That
wild. Was crazy.
That's
like,
nice.
This song hasn't even come out. It's dropping tonight. We're celebrating its release at midnight, and you guys already know the chorus. You saw me posting a snippet of it when I was in the studio, or on my Instagram or TikTok or something. I got to keep the perspective of that gratitude so that I can always realize, like, man, look how far I've come. So that's part of the reason why I try to like also really, really take it in when they sing the lyrics. I'm sometimes going to pull off that mic and just listen to it and just realize what's actually happening. Never get used to it,
Yeah.
Right. And you know what? I don't see you as arrogant or big-headed, any of that. your humility stands out. And I'm reminded of the scripture, and he said in his word, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And man, you just embrace that grace because it's God's enabling power and his ability. So I'm still, this has been such a great conversation, and it's so encouraging. So many people need to hear from you and hear your heart. It's just a blessing.
Do you think that do you think that humbleness comes because of all the hard work to get to where he is? I mean, it's been a short journey in perspective, but it's still a lot of work. I mean, if you're at a coffee shop performing to 15 people, and then a few years later you're headlining at youth events and conferences and churches and sold out stadiums and whatnot. I mean, but if you have that perspective of knowing where it all started and not letting it get to your head, I mean, I think that kind of forces you to be humble a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's clear that God has used me, right? And I think that's also, Hard Work God First is one of the songs. It's the main single from this last album, and I'm super grateful for just how many people it's reaching. But that's literally the formula. I've had this index card that I look at every morning since like 2020 and just read that phrase, hard work God first. 1 Corinthians 15:10, written right underneath it. But whatever I am now, it's all because God poured out a special favor on me, and not without results. For I've worked harder than any of the other apostles, yet it was not I, but God's grace through me. And what that kind of showed me is like, look, that's Paul writing, and there's that element where he's like, look, I got to bring results to the table because God has chosen to use me. So I got to be faithful with those results. And I'm going to work as hard as I can. Even, there are people in this field who I'm going to work harder than just because of the calling. But at the end of the day, it's always God through me. I think that confidence, is coming from the time you've put in just as much as the humility is coming from the time you've put in. It's like you're going to be more confident in your shot during a game if you've practiced that shot 1,000 times. You're going to have the boldness to know I can make this. But at the same time, you're going to make it. You're going to have the humility of like, this isn't something that was a superpower. I had to work really hard to get to this point. And that's why Hard Work God First, the message of that song is really the motto of like everything that I do. It's like, that's the formula. Somebody asked me in my Instagram DMs the other day, like, how do you get to this lifestyle? How do you get to this point? And I was like, it's simple. It's really hard work God first. And there's this verse in Joshua that is kind of the verse for these last couple of years for me. Joshua's about to go take the promised land, and God doesn't hype him up and say, do push-ups, sharpen your weapon, go hit a punching bag. Like, he just says, rest, for the city's already yours. I think there's also that element of like, if you truly believe God is who he says he is, and you believe he's called you to something, rest, because the city's already yours. And the recent single that we put out on this last album is called The City Is Mine. And we literally went to 7 different cities in 7 days, and I just performed the song outside of these different arenas. And I'm putting it out there, having the boldness to say someday I will headline these arenas because I believe it's part of the calling. And then I'm going to show you that even if it takes me 30 years, I'll keep showing up until I fulfill kind of the promise that God has given me, until I step into the calling I believe I have. And I'm going to show you that I have the courage to put it out there and not be afraid of the judgment or afraid of failure. Because in the end, somebody has a goal, somebody has a calling, and maybe I can be that extra push for them to actually go get it and do it for God. The end of the album, there's a track that makes me tear up every time. I just say the same phrase over and over: pick the light, young soldier. And that's my heart. I want
Love it.
Generation to choose God. I want to show them that they can win. And if I can show them that through my life and through my ministry and through my music and through my performance, is mission accomplished. And, I check the scoreboard and I know how this ends. We already won.
This is awesome. Mm-hmm. This is awesome. Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about the business of your career? Because this is obviously your full-time vocation. Best part of the job, worst part of the job?
Great question.
That's a great question. I'm not exaggerating when I say like this is all I do all the time. I just kind of made this commitment, like this is all my time and energy. I feel like best part, man, I love so much of it. I enjoy all of it. One of my favorite parts is definitely that live experience with people who care about the music, just when they're at the show and they resonate with it, or like hearing, in the VIPs or in meet and greets or on socials, hearing the story of how it impacted somebody. Mm-hmm. I think, there was a point in my career where the numbers could be like were overwhelming and I felt like I had to hit them. And a lot of that had to do with the team at the time, but just, I don't know, realizing like impact is the most valuable currency. It's the most important thing that we can do here for the one, right? So I think my favorite part right now is just actually finding out or seeing how it hits people. Like, oh, wow, this person, has been living life to this song. And I just got the chance to connect with them and hear how they've been living life to it, or what it got them through, or what their story is with this music. The least favorite part, which is a discipline that I work on every day, is just it's the consistency. There's a lot of mundane to it. If you're the owner, the CEO of your company, I mean, even this week as we're having this conversation, I have my executive team and we're all flying in and we're having a team summit, and we're going to be spending, 2 days just talking through rollout and talking through, the creative output. And that's the kind of thing where I do enjoy it, but there's a lot of crossing T's, dotting I's. And this is, this is not just like, oh yeah, we have a label team and as the artist and the talent, you come in and figure it out. Like these are personal hires, full-time partners and employees who are building this company with me and this vision with me. And so I have a responsibility to show up and lead them well. And there's a lot of stuff that is, it's just discipline where it's like, man, I don't feel like doing this today. All these emails, all this back office stuff. I wish I could just be in the studio and just vibe out. But if, who's going to carry the boats? David Goggins.
Right.
He's always, if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? It's going to fall through. So I just got the privilege of being at a business conference and headlining, like last week, headlining this, entrepreneurial kind of like motivational conference thing. And just even being around, business owners and leaders, and opening up for Tim Grover, who was Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan's, personal coach at a time. Being in those environments, you walk away with the perspective that, no matter how uncomfortable or how difficult it is on the business side at times, you just got to keep showing up. You have a responsibility too. Sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, we've talked about it in this conversation. There is that element where it's like, I got to get perspective and just kind of shake myself for a minute and be like, you get to do music. Like, this is the dream. Even the most difficult days, the most, you're up. Like last night, literally, I was up till 4 a.m. In a studio session because we had a work day preparing for the summit all day. And then we went to the studio and we're working all night. And even just that, it's like, but you're doing music. This is the best.
Yeah, you get to do what you've dreamed of doing.
Love to do. Yeah.
So perspective is everything, and if you can take responsibility as a leader, like, it's my fault. Something went down and, a team member or a task or something fell through. Well, I take responsibility as a leader, and how do I get to the root of it, and how do we fix it for next time? Game film. How do we watch what went down? And that can only be overwhelming if you're afraid of responsibility and if you're afraid of, accountability. But if you're good with that stuff, I think that's why a lot of athletes resonate with what I do musically, because I'm always talking about that. Like, look, you just got to show up. Even when it hurts, you got to keep showing up. But I love all of it. There's difficulty, but there's nothing that I dislike. It's just sometimes uncomfortable. But you don't grow when you're comfortable, right? So you got to push through anyways. Yeah,
and if there's things you don't like if it's the email or whatever, there's always something in a job that is just it's time consuming, or it's mundane, or it's boring, or whatever else. And if that's something that you can somehow spend less time doing because it's not effective, or have somebody on your team help you out with certain things because you don't want that to overtake you. You don't want to be overcome by these mundane things and it consume you, because then you don't have that creative channel that you can use and shine in.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. At that last conference, my friend Josie Parks, who was the guy putting on the whole conference, he even, kind of expressed that sentiment that like the 80-20 rule that he kind of abides by is like there's 20% of the things in that company, in that business, or in that ministry that have to get done that are going to move it forward. And then there's 80% kind of done by anybody. And you can't get so caught up in the 80% that you neglect the 20, like you're saying, bro, like the 20% would be somebody's got to be on that microphone. Somebody's got to be making the music. Somebody's got to plan the set. Somebody's got to create the content. And
sure enough.
If you can balance and delegate and use like teamwork to get that 80% carried, then you can be faithful with the 20. And I think what I believe for like young artists is like, look, in the beginning, you're going to have to do everything. In the beginning, you're going to have to be your own biggest fan. You're going to have to show up and, do all of it, like direct videos, edit videos, create content,
right.
Create music, follow up with, outlets and just like get it on DSPs. Like you're going to be responsible for doing everything. But if you push past, it's like any business, you're not going to be profitable for a certain amount of time. If you push past all the mud and you're just willing to like keep working, keep showing up, eventually you're going to start attracting the team members that you need. You're going to start attracting the people who understand the vision and align with it. And then you're going to be looking up 7 years in and be like, wow, like God has blessed me with a team of all-stars that are, out of my league, but it's because they see what this could be. And then they were never out of the league because they're drawn to the work ethic and they're drawn to the vision. I'm sure you guys have experienced that, like the consistency. I mean, I can't even imagine you guys got to show up over and over and over and be consistent, provide value, keep it interesting and interact with different talent. But like that front lines consistency draws the right conversations. It draws the right people and it draws the right audience,
Absolutely.
Sure.
Zauntee,
discipline plus consistency.
That's right. Hard work.
Come on.
God first.
First, let's go.
That's right. Zauntee, what a pleasure chatting with you. I had no preconceived ideas of what we would chat about or how this conversation would go. And I appreciate your the fact that you're so candid, that you're so mature, and that you've just given us tons and tons of great wisdom at your age. And I don't want to downplay the age thing either, right? I'm not saying you're a kid or anything like that. Although, quite frankly, I still think I'm a kid. So I'm the immature one. But really appreciate your time.
Thank you all so much. Can I pray for you guys before we leave?
That would be awesome.
I'd love that.
All right. Lord, I thank you so much for James, for Ayiesha, for Justine, for the whole team that's involved in this. God, they are being faithful. They're on the front lines, serving you consistently. Give them the strength to not grow weary in well-doing, but to walk and not faint, to run and not grow weary, to be strong, to give the words. Holy Spirit, move them out of the way and give them the words to say. I thank you that there's somebody that they'll never meet who feels like they are best friends, who tunes in every time consistently, isn't trackable with the data, isn't trackable with the analytics, but it's just a real person who needs these conversations, who needs this show, who needs this music.
Yes, God.
I pray that they would understand the weight of that and that just the fruit of their faithfulness, God, that they would both feel it. And in every area, in their personal lives, in their family lives, in their music and ministry, everything that they have done, everything that they will do, God, in both of their stories, these two people you've joined together to make an impact over and over and over. I pray that they would just feel really seen and really just valued because, God, you are using them in a mighty way for your kingdom to reach the lost and to encourage believers. Help them to feel renewed, to feel refreshed, peace, and just bless them for how kind they were to me, for how easy this conversation was, how much value is going to be received from it. God, please bless them for making that possible. And we love you, Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
I don't know about y'all. I can run through a wall right now. I'm not.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, so good. Appreciate you, Zauntee. Appreciate all the words that you've shared with us, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thank you guys so much for your time, and forward to doing it again. Let us know if you ever need anything.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
Great rest of your day, guys.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
I'll tell you what, I could listen to that episode again. At a later time, I'm going to play it back and listen to it.
I agree.
Good.
This guy, I'm telling you, that was completely unexpected.
Right. It was so powerful.
Yeah, listen, you want to check out his website, Zauntee.com. It's got access to all the music. You got to listen to his stuff. You really do. He's got some amazing tracks, and follow him on the socials as well. This guy is inspiring, and he's going to pump you up every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's check out some artist advice now from Mitch Wong.
Remember why you're doing it. Remember why you fell in love with songwriting and singing and worship leading, because if you lose sight of that, you can get really discouraged really quickly. So I think I've had to learn to remember myself as a 15-year-old boy. I was like pimply teenager, just in my room till 3 a.m. working on demos, and it's because I just wanted to give God an amazing song. And I think the more like reputation and success, it's very easy to lose sight of that. So I've had to remember my first love.
It sounds like Mitch and Zauntee are best friends or something, because their message is the same, you know?
I know, right?
Yeah.
That
Talk
was
about
so
timing.
cool how it coincides. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much to Mitch for jumping in with that artist advice. And thanks to Zauntee for hanging with us. I will say we've got to have him back.
Yes, indeed.
This guy's got a wealth of knowledge in the short span that he's been in this business, but he's going to be in it for a long time. And so we definitely want to bring him back at some point and just see what else he can give to us, what other nuggets, what other wisdom he can impart.
Mm-hmm. And if not, we'll just have to make it to one of his engagements.
For sure.
Whether it be up where you are or down where I am or somewhere in between.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to Between the Grooves on behalf of James, Ayiesha, and our producer, Justine.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Faith Strong Today's Between the Grooves podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your friends, rating our podcast, or giving us some love on your socials to your amazing friends and followers will only help us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you and share your feedback in an upcoming episode. Send your video or written message to Ayiesha and James on Facebook or X at Between Grooves and on Instagram at Between Grooves Pod. Or email us anytime, hello@faithstrongtoday.com.